What if the footsteps in your hallway kept going after you stopped? Welcome to the channel. Tonight I have something truly haunting for you. From a window that looks onto nowhere, to a train that sometimes arrives without passengers, to a night shift that plays back voices no one recorded, every story here is a mystery waiting to unfold. Which story creeped you out the most? Tell me in the comments when you make it to the end. Story 1. The window that faced nowhere. I moved into the attic apartment because it was cheap and because the landlord shrugged when I asked about the window. It was a tall pane tucked into the slanted roof, framed by old wood that smelled like rain. From the street, the building faced a row of townhouses and a narrow maple tree. But when I climbed the last creaky steps and stood in my new place, the only window didn't look at the street. It looked at a wall that shouldn't exist. Not brick. Not wood. Just a soft gray surface that had no seams and no marks, as if fog had been poured into a mold and left to harden. At first I thought it was some kind of frosted glass trick. I tapped the pane. Solid. I tried opening it and felt the weight of swollen paint and swollen time. It groaned and then gave an inch, just enough to let in a faint draft that smelled like wet paper. When I leaned close, the gray seemed to ripple, not like water, more like the way air shivers above asphalt in summer. Only it was evening. The street was quiet. Somewhere below, a dog barked and then cut off, like someone turned a dial. I told myself it was nothing. Then the gray surface breathed in. I froze. It wasn't loud or obvious, just a slow, almost inaudible pull of air through the narrow opening. The kind of inhale you don't notice until it stops. And it did stop, suddenly. Like whatever was on the other side realized I was listening. My pulse thumped in my throat, and I shut the window, pressing the latch down hard. The pane rattled once, as if something outside had touched it, testing the glass. That night, I woke at 3:17 a.m. to the faint sound of tapping. At first I thought it was rain, but the pattern was too deliberate. 3 taps. Pause. 2 taps. Pause. Over and over. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, telling myself it was a branch, except there were no trees tall enough to reach the attic. Eventually, curiosity gnawed its way past fear. I climbed out of bed, my bare feet cold on the wood floor, and went to the window. The gray surface outside seemed closer than before. The ripple was gone. It was perfectly still, like it was holding its breath. And then, just for an instant, a shape pressed against it, the outline of a hand, 5 long fingers, palm flat, as if waiting for me to touch it back. I stumbled backward, nearly tripping over the edge of the bed. The hand didn't move, didn't smear away like mist. It just stayed there, pressed to the gray as though it was on the other side of a thin veil. I couldn't see any features beyond the shape, no skin, no nails, just a darker shadow within the fog. Then, slowly, the fingers curled, one by one, until it formed a loose fist. The surface seemed to shiver around it. My instinct screamed to run, to leave the apartment right then, but my body felt pinned to the floor, watching as the shape withdrew. The gray rippled again, like something large was moving away into a distance I couldn't see. I slammed the curtains shut and told myself I'd sleep in the living room, away from that impossible view. But as I turned, I froze again. The sound had returned, not tapping this time, but scratching, faint and slow, like something tracing the outline of the frame from the outside. It kept going until sunrise. When I dared to peek again, the gray surface was gone. My window now showed the street, the maple tree swaying gently. I almost convinced myself it was all a dream, until I noticed the faint, oily imprint of a hand on the inside of the glass. I cleaned the glass 3 times that morning, but the handprint wouldn't fade. It wasn't smudged like grease, it was faintly darker, as though the very surface had been etched. By afternoon, I decided to take the stairs down to the street, thinking a walk would clear my head. That's when I noticed something that made my skin crawl. From outside, my attic window was gone. There was nothing but an unbroken roofline, slate shingle stretching across where the glass should have been. I stood in the middle of the street staring up, waiting for someone else to notice, but no one even glanced my way. I asked my landlord about it that evening, trying to sound casual. He gave me a long, unreadable look before saying, "That apartment's been empty for years. Windows up there don't open to anywhere." Then he smiled, too thinly to be kind, and walked away. That night, I couldn't resist checking one last time. I pulled the curtains back. The gray surface was there again, closer than ever. Something was moving inside it, pacing, as though waiting for me to come nearer. When I turned to step away, the glass fogged over from the inside, and 5 words appeared in a slow, deliberate scrawl, "Let me in this time." Story 2, last train to Hollow Bridge. The train to Hollow Bridge only runs twice a day, once at dawn, once just after midnight. Nobody ever explains why. The schedule isn't posted anywhere official, you just have to know. My grandfather used to warn me never to take the midnight ride, but he never said why, just that things aren't the same at night. One cold autumn evening, I missed the last regular train home. The station was empty except for a single bench, a flickering light, and a ticket machine that still listed Hollow Bridge as a destination. The time read 12:02 a.m. My chest tightened when I heard the rumble, not like a modern train, but the deep, metallic churn of something older, heavier. It emerged from the fog with carriages painted black, windows dark, and no lights inside. The doors opened without a sound. No conductor. No passengers. Just the faint smell of iron and wet stone. I told myself it was fine, a ride was a ride. I stepped inside, my shoes echoing too loudly on the wood floor. The air felt thick, like breathing in a cellar. I picked a seat by the window, hoping to watch the night pass, but when the train lurched forward, the view outside wasn't the countryside anymore. It was a tunnel, endless, twisting, lined with stone walls that seemed to shimmer like they were breathing. The tunnel walls slid past in slow, deliberate waves, like they were alive and just pretending to be stone. Every so often, I'd catch glimpses of movement, not shapes exactly, but shadows shifting in ways that didn't match the train's motion. There was no hum of electricity, no clatter of modern wheels. Instead, each turn of the axle groaned like metal under strain, and the whole carriage vibrated with a low, steady pulse. I realized, with a chill, that it felt more like a heartbeat than an engine. I tried to distract myself by looking down the aisle. There were 10 rows of seats, all empty, but the further I looked, the less they seemed to line up properly. The aisle stretched too far, bending slightly, and I could swear I saw the back rows moving away from me, like the carriage was lengthening. Then I heard it, a faint tapping on the window beside me. At first I thought it was from the outside, but when I leaned closer, it came again, from inside the glass. A pale face pressed up against it, not outside in the tunnel, but between the panes. Its eyes were wide and unblinking, mouth opening and closing soundlessly, as if it was mouthing words I couldn't hear. I jerked back, my seat creaking under me. The face vanished, replaced by my own reflection. But my reflection didn't move when I did. My reflection stared back at me, head tilted just slightly off-center, lips curling into a smile I didn't make. The longer I looked, the more wrong it became, the eyes too deep, the skin too pale, the grin stretching just a little too wide. Then it raised a hand and tapped the glass from its side. 3 slow knocks. I felt the vibration through my fingertips. My breath hitched, and I turned to leave the seat, to get as far from the window as possible. But when I glanced down the aisle, I froze. There were passengers now. They hadn't been there a second ago, but the seats were filling up, row after row, with figures slumped forward, heads bent as if asleep. Some wore tattered coats, others clothes I didn't recognize, styles decades out of date. A damp, earthy smell filled the air, like rotting leaves after rain. None of them moved. I took a step toward the nearest door, but the train jolted violently, throwing me off balance. The lights above flickered, and in the split-second darkness, all of them had turned their heads toward me. Eyes wide. Mouths closed. And they were all smiling the same impossible smile my reflection had worn. The carriage grew colder, each breath curling in front of me like pale smoke. None of the passengers blinked. Their grins stayed frozen, their eyes locked on mine as the train rattled deeper into the tunnel. I backed toward the door, fumbling for the handle, but my fingers found only smooth metal, no latch, no seam. Then, one by one, the passengers began to stand. Not hurried, not jerky, just slow, deliberate movements, like they'd been waiting for this moment. Their footsteps were soundless on the wooden floor, yet each step made the walls of the tunnel pulse and shiver. I turned back to the window, desperate for something else to focus on, but the tunnel was gone. Now it was just blackness. No light, no shape, no hint of motion, until, faintly, the pale face returned between the glass. Only this time, it wasn't mimicking me. Its mouth moved again, but now I could hear it. The words were faint, almost swallowed by the hum of the train. "You missed your stop." The world lurched sideways. My vision blurred, my stomach dropped, and I felt the floor vanish beneath my feet. When I came to, I was standing alone on an empty platform. The train was gone. No sign it had ever been there. Only a damp, crumpled ticket in my hand, ink smeared except for the destination printed in bold: return. Midnight. Story 3, the night shift recorder working nights at the radio station was supposed to be easy money. The building was half empty after 10 p.m., and my only job was to monitor the emergency broadcast system and keep the music running. Most nights, it was just me, the hum of the mixing boards, and the occasional hiss of static. One Tuesday, the station manager left a dusty reel-to-reel recorder on my desk before heading out. "Use this if the system glitches," he said. "It's old, but it works. Just, don't rewind it all the way." Then he gave me a look I didn't understand and left. Around 1 a.m., the music feed cut out for the first time in weeks. Dead air. I grabbed the recorder, pressed play, and let the soft hiss fill the speakers. For a moment, it was fine, just ambient noise to keep the line alive. Then, faintly, beneath the static, I heard a voice. It wasn't a broadcast. It wasn't even in the right tone for radio. It sounded like someone whispering right next to the microphone, each word drawn out like they knew I was listening. "Don't turn around." My stomach nodded. I was the only one in the building. The whisper was so close I could almost feel breath against my ear, but the studio was empty. I checked the door, still locked from the inside. My hands were shaking as I leaned closer to the recorder. The hiss crackled again, and the same voice spoke, clearer this time. "You're not alone." A faint click followed, like an old cassette button being pressed. Then I heard footsteps, not in the recording, but in the hallway outside the studio. Slow, deliberate steps, stopping just beyond the door. I froze in my chair. My instinct was to cut the feed, but the moment I reached for the power switch, the recorder hissed louder, almost like it was warning me. Then, layered under the static, I heard something else, the sound of my own voice, but from earlier that night. It was repeating things I'd said into the microphone hours ago, perfectly mimicked. And then, it spoke a sentence I had never said. "I'm letting it in now." The footsteps started again, only this time they were inside the room. I spun in my chair, heart pounding so hard I thought I might be sick. The room was empty. Just rows of silent equipment glowing faintly in the dark. No footsteps now, no sound at all except the steady hiss of the recorder still running. Then, in the corner of my eye, the reflection in the studio glass moved. I snapped my head toward it, but my reflection wasn't doing what I was doing. It was leaning forward, closer to the glass, as if peering at something over my shoulder. I turned slowly. Nothing. When I looked back, my reflection was gone entirely. In its place was a shadow, darker than the rest of the room, shaped almost like a person but with no face, just an empty void where the head should be. It tilted to one side, listening. The hiss on the recorder shifted. I could make out faint breathing again, but now there was more than one set. And through the static, the voice returned, quieter but clearer than ever. "You'll hear us when the tape runs out." The reel kept turning, the sound of the tape spinning faster, as if it was hurrying towards something. The reel spun faster, the hiss deepening into a low rumble that made the floor vibrate beneath my feet. I could feel it in my chest, like a second heartbeat that wasn't mine. The shadow in the glass didn't move, but I could sense something shifting behind me, a weight in the air, thick and pressing, as though the room itself was leaning in to listen. The breathing on the tape grew louder, overlapping, a chorus of voices whispering just below the threshold of understanding. I caught fragments, my name, the name of the station, dates I didn't recognize. The air grew colder, enough to make my fingers ache, but I couldn't bring myself to stop the recorder. Then, without warning, the reel clicked to a stop. Silence. I let out a shaky breath and reached for the machine, but before I could touch it, the speaker crackled one last time. A single voice spoke, my voice, but deeper, wrong, and it said, "We're live." The studio lights went out. When they flickered back on, the reel-to-reel was gone. In its place sat a fresh tape labeled with the date and time, of tomorrow's shift.